Friends, would you all please be seated? My dear friends, before we begin the service this morning, may I respectfully request that anyone who might be carrying a cell phone or any other electronic device, please place it in the off or silent mode at this time. We thank you in advance for your cooperation with us as we maintain decorum in the synagogue this morning. Friends, it's with shock and profound sadness that we gather this morning to honor a person who made a big difference in all of our lives, in the life of this synagogue, in the life of this community. A person who, someone remarked to me as they enter the sanctuary, a person who, if you looked up the word mention in a dictionary, it'd be Gary Hutmacher's face that you'd see as the picture. That's who we have come to not only mourn, but to honor today. Dear friends, we're going to not only mourn, but honor Gary today. Comfort his grieving family, and to elevate his memory. We're going to do so with the words of Tehillim, with the words of Psalms, with the words of Nevi'im, the words of our prophets, and with the tender and heartfelt recollections and memories of dear members of Gary's family and community who want to talk to us about him today. We'll begin with the words of the 103rd Psalm. Parachim aval banim richam Adonai al yirei av ki hu yada yitzrenu zachor ki afar anachnu. Enosh ki chatzir mav katzis hasadeh kein yatzitz ki ruach avrubo ve'einenu v'lo yikarenu od mekomo. V'chesed Adonai me'olam v'olam al yirei av v'tzid kato livnei vanim. Tender like parents with their children, the Lord is merciful with all humanity. He knows how we are fashioned, and he remembers that we are but dust. Our days are like that of grass. We flourish like a flower in the field. And then the wind passes over and it is gone, and no one can recognize from where it once grew. But we have faith that God's compassion for all humanity, and that his righteousness to even children's children, will remain, age after age, unchanging. Kol asher levavi tzur levavi v'chelki Elohim le'olam. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart, and truly my portion forever. From the words of Yeshayahu, the prophet Isaiah, Al tira kim cha'ani, al tishta ki ani Elohecha, imatz ticha, af azar ticha, af tamach ticha b'min tzidki. Fear not, for I am with you, and be not dismayed, for I am the Lord your God. I will strengthen you, and I will help you, and I will sustain you with all of my power. Now call upon Cantor Sam Weiss to lead us in the words of the 23rd Psalm.
Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi v'lo echsar. Binodeh sheyarbitzeni al mei menuchot yenaleini. Nafshi yishovev yamcheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki yeilech begeitz al mavet lo irara ki ata imo משפטך משענתך, אימה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי, דשנת בשמן ראשי כוסי רוויה. אך טוב החסד גידפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני ליורך ימים.
The Lord is my shepherd, so I shall not want. He caused me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He guides me on paths of righteousness. He revives my soul for the sake of his glory. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no harm, for you, my Lord, are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. Surely my cup runs over. May goodness and mercy follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And let us say together, Amen. Friends, there are several members of the family and the community who will be calling on to speak about Gary today. We'd like to begin by calling upon beloved granddaughters Heather and Erin.
As I type this speech, my heart is broken. For all my life, Zadie has wanted to know and support me on everything I do. Whether it was volleyball games or dance recitals or trivia games in his living room, he wanted to be there. Zadie loved me and my sister like no other, and I know that anyone who knew him received that same amount of unconditional love and attention. He always told me in his voicemails and FaceTimes that he didn't take any offense to me not answering when I was at dance or at school or with friends, because he wanted and knew that I was out doing things I loved, and that's the type of person and grandfather he was. It brings me so much comfort in seeing everyone here today, knowing that he has all these people who love him just as much as me. My final words to him and to everyone here is that you should all know that if he were here right now, he would tell us that he wants us to continue living and being happy. He'd be extremely upset if any of us were to let this tragedy ruin the time we do have. So although it's hard, it's what he would want for all of us. We will live for him and honor his memory with the things he loved. I love you, Zadie. Thank you.
As I'm sure many of you can relate, it all feels very surreal, and never in a million years could I have imagined standing here today, and definitely never wanted to. But standing here today reminds me and everyone else how incredibly our Zadie or Gary touched so many people's lives. When thinking of what to write, I wasn't too sure the best way to put how much he meant to me and everyone else into words. I did, though, know exactly the impact he left on me and many others. And while I could talk for hours about fun, silly, exciting memories with him, I also want to talk a little about how amazing of a person he was. He was single-handedly the most loving, caring, generous person I knew. I've never seen someone who values and admires their family more than he did, and it was always so special getting to watch him light up every single chance he got to talk about his grandkids, sister, wife, parents, son, or anyone else he knew and loved. He never failed to be selfless and ready to help, and was always eager to brag a little about his family. Our Zadie was always counting down to see us, beyond excited to give us any type of gift or thing he found that reminded him of us, and he would do absolutely anything to be supporting us or anyone else. I'll always cherish our winter break trips that we had to Florida, the dance performances that him and our grandma came to see, and the tons and tons of happy memories we shared. After all, I can't quite think of any other grandparent in the world who would proudly walk around town with a Zadie-saurus shirt on, labeling me and Erin as his granddaughters. He was always so proud of everything and anything we did, and I'll always value and remember, and of course miss, his phone calls, photos texted of him with his friends and family, and most definitely his Shabbos greetings text, which he never once failed to send. this past Shabbat, he had called me, and I was actually at a Shabbat service for a Jewish youth group called BBYO as my president's chapter, and I had gotten other members to come as well. Well, I knew that he would have been so beyond happy to hear that that was where I was and to hear more about it later. Unfortunately, I was never able to tell him about it, but I know how important Judaism was to him. I could not be happier to know that I was embracing that when he last called. I could not be more proud to be the granddaughter of someone who so many people love and admire. And I hope that I can learn to be as selfless and caring as he always was. And I know he would be so honored to see all of you here today.
And would now like to call upon Warren.
Shalom. Thank you all for being here today. My last appearance here on this bima was in 1986, and I'm sure a lot of you here remember my truly epic chanting of the Haftorah. Rest easy, friends and family. My remarks today will not include any attempt at singing. There's no doubt that this synagogue is my dad's special place. He loved being Jewish, and this synagogue especially was his home, and it meant the world to him. It brings my mom and I a sense of peace and comfort to be back here today. And Rabbi Wiener, my dad, helped you in the highest esteem and felt so proud to be a part of your life. Thank you for allowing us to hold our service here today, and it meant so much to him to know that when his time came that you would be leading the service. A few months ago, I was listening to my friend Doug's father's funeral, and he made a comment that his dad loved a good funeral. It was a really funny comment, and the context that followed was that his dad always showed up for people and that he wanted to pay his respects. As I thought about it, I realized that I also love a good funeral. It sounds a little dark, however, I love the chance to learn about interesting people and how their lives, well lived, have impacted the people they love. You learn a lot at a funeral about a person, and I always take something away from it that lifts my spirits. I struggled mightily with what to say today, as I'm sure every son who loves their dad struggles. How do you summarize a life and all the moments from 75 wonderful years in just a short eulogy? I guess you really can't, and I won't try. I wanted to convey to everyone here today how special my relationship with my dad, and let you in on a side of him you may not know well. And being Gary's kid, I'll try to insert some well-meaning humor into my comments, as I think my dad would like that. He could always laugh at himself, tried hard to make others laugh, and didn't take life too seriously that you can't have a laugh here and there, even at his funeral. For some of you who may not know his history, my dad was born in Warsaw, Poland in 1946 and quickly moved to Stockholm, Sweden, and then shortly thereafter in 1949, he made his way to New York with his mother. His father was unable to get a visa and remained in Stockholm another 2 full years before the family was finally reunited. My dad contracted measles shortly before getting on the boat in Sweden headed to New York. My grandmother was scared that if they saw he was sick, they would send him back to Sweden with no certainty on when they could emigrate. So she put pancake mix over his measles to hide them and tried to lay low in the shadows of the boat. After she felt they were sufficiently far out to sea that they couldn't return them to Sweden, she took him to the doctor on the boat, and he was treated and even upgraded to first class so that he could be isolated from other passengers in a private room at no extra charge. Though even at 3 years old, my dad was figuring out how to beat the system and get something for free. My dad was raised in the Bronx on Undercliff Avenue and had a wonderful childhood there, where he was surrounded by family and many friends. He took great pride in being from the Bronx and had vivid memories of his street and neighborhood. He attended Long Island University in Brooklyn, where he was initially pre-med. So my grandmother was a practicing physician, and he was always so proud of her. Clearly, he wanted to follow in her footsteps at one point as a doctor. Unfortunately, he did not have the stomach for it. The first time he had to dissect an animal for his entry-level science class, he panicked. Somehow he was able to talk the instructor into allowing him to take the animal out of the lab so that he could perform the dissection at home. His grand plan was to have my grandmother perform the dissection. This may not have been the best way to train to be a doctor, and probably wasn't going to be a good long-term plan for all the work he would have to do. So after this, he wisely shifted his studies to education. My dad taught elementary school and then later phys ed and health in the South Bronx. Well, the neighborhood and school were not exactly in the rich part of town. We lost a few cars, several radios, and at least one battery over the years. For years, we took out the radio in the car and put up a sign on the window that says, "Don't break the window, radio already stolen." My dad's favorite story was one day he walked out of school to his car to drive home, and mysteriously his car wouldn't start. So he raised the hood of the car, not that he would have known what he was looking at inside the car anyway, and the battery was missing. But luckily, a nice young man was walking over and just happened to have a battery with him for sale. Coincidentally, it was the same brand and the same model battery that was in the car just hours ago. This was indeed a miracle. My dad did have his suspicions that maybe this guy that stole his battery was stolen the battery and then selling it back to him. My dad had thoughts of making accusations and taking back his battery by force, but when he saw three or four of the battery salesman's colleagues appear to challenge his initial objections, he recognized a good deal and bought his battery back. But he did get him to throw in the installation at no extra charge. It was fun visiting my dad at school if I had a day off and he needed to take me with him. I got to play in the school gym all day, and as a little kid, I thought he had a pretty cool job. He grew frustrated with his job after a few years, and I think all throughout his life, he wanted to do something else in business or sales or psychology instead of working at the school. Like a lot of his contemporaries, he recognized he would have a good pension and benefits, and that for his family's sake, he had to stick it out to get to retirement. I always felt bad for my dad, that he didn't get a chance to change careers. He always told me, find something to do with yourself to make enough money to take care of your family, but that you should enjoy going in every day and feeling challenged and appreciated. It was good advice. One of the benefits, however, of being a teacher is that you get to go home early. And although my dad worked several side jobs and owned a few businesses over the years to supplement his income, as an only child, my dad was my official backup playmate. We would spend hours shooting hoops or throwing the football in the side yard. When I wanted to learn how to pitch a baseball, he was my catcher. And so we got him a catcher's mitt. And I literally had no control or idea of where the ball was going to be when it left my hands. He was terrified every time I asked him to catch me. He had no protective equipment. He wasn't that good at catching, and the pitching lessons would usually end up with him bruised and battered. He ultimately convinced me that my talents would be better served far away in the outfield instead of pitching. He always had time to spend with me and my friends. He was the quarterback of our interceptions games and showed up to every game I had. I was a misunderstood athlete, and he suffered through a lot of terrible games, but always had a smile and an encouraging word. I was struck by how many of my friends who've commented and called me remembered him playing with us when they offered their condolences. He was my favorite golf partner. He was not the best golfer, and for years I don't think he even liked golf. He just saw it as a chance to spend time with me. I always cherished the times I would come home from camp in the summer, and he'd be waiting. Gloves are in the car, Warren. Get in. We're going to go get 9 or 18 in before it gets dark. We took a trip to Vegas one year to play golf, and our golf outings in Florida were a regular occurrence before his stroke. But his rules for playing with him were very clear. He paid for golf. He bought lunch. He was very liberal with his scoring and rules interpretations, and obsessed with insisting that I pick out a hat or a shirt in the golf shop as a souvenir. And this was non-negotiable, no matter how much you didn't want something from the golf shop. He loved souvenirs, if y'all know him. And he's famous in our family for the collection of crap that he picked up all the time and collected. This obsession started with taught me to distract the hotel staff and collect or steal the shampoos and soaps from the cart. He's very proud of himself. He would go to the bank sometimes just to see what they might be giving away that day to customers. He lifted every free thing at festivals or anywhere he could get something for free. Just last week, this collection of stuff he gave to my daughters included one of those weekly pill boxes that people his age, use to medication from Monday through Friday. So I asked him, I said, Dad, what are you thinking? What do you think Heather and Aaron would want or need this for? And his response was always the same as it was. It was free, therefore it was good. Whether you need it or not is not his problem. My dad was prideful about his heritage and the importance of being proud to be Jewish. It was clear that he was deeply impacted throughout his life with the losses our family had in the Holocaust and the pain he knew it caused my grandfather, who lost his parents and sisters to the Nazis. My dad, for his whole life, wouldn't buy a German car or a German product. It was his personal protest and a way of honoring those his family lost. He had no control otherwise. As I've gotten older, I appreciate where his anger came from and for his wish that we retain our right to practice our Judaism without fear in this country. Most of all, my dad always showed up, always listened, and always was there to help with no strings attached. My problems instantly were his problems. But this could go sometimes a little far for a slightly neurotic Jewish father. If I told him I had a headache, he immediately worried and was convinced that it was a brain tumor, and that he would ask me every 30 minutes how my head was feeling. He was visibly relieved when I told him the headache subsided. Because of this, I hadn't told him I had a headache in 30 years to avoid his worry. But his neurosis could also be used to my advantage. He was always very generous and would be offended if I tried to pay for something in his presence. In recent years, he became obsessed with paying to fill up my gas tank when he visited town. He would call days ahead of a planned visit to Atlanta, instructing me to make sure that I used up all of my gas before he got there so that we could go together, because he didn't trust that I would put gas in the car and that he could pay to fill up the tank. He would be very upset with me if he showed up to town and my wife or I had more than a quarter tank when he arrived. He wouldn't leave town until we showed him that my wife and I had full tanks. I thought he was nuts, but really this was his way of helping. And then there were the Zadie deals or dad deals that we had. They're structured as such. He calls me up to let me know he's playing poker that evening and wanted to know if I wanted to be his partner. I wanted to carefully evaluate, of course, what this meant so that I could make a good business decision. So he explained that if he wins, he sends me the money. And if he loses, he also sends me money, but just a little bit less. This was a good Zadie deal. For the Super Bowl every year, he asked me if I wanted to buy into the Super Bowl pool he participates in with his friends. What this means in Zadie language is that he pays for the full entry fee for both of us, and if either he or I win, I get the money. Another great Zadie deal. My parents raised me as a team, like any good parents do, and they worked hard not to contradict one another when I would strategically ask my dad for something after mom said no. However, he was the original Disney dad before that was a thing, and he was always the softie. He taught me some very bad parenting habits about trying to circumvent my mom, who was the heavy, and I really appreciated what he did. He would feel bad for me if I was punished for not cleaning up my room, and without my mom seeing, he would quietly come into the room and start yelling at me, "You better clean this room, you're accountable, you need to do this." But the entire time he was picking up things all over the room, making sure they were put away so that I could get out of my punishment and get out to play. He wanted to make sure my mom did not know that. And my mother, every year growing up, was very excited to take me clothes shopping for school. To put it kindly, Mom, we didn't always have the same expectations for clothes choices, and conflict typically ensued during these shopping trips. Her rule was that you didn't have to get anything you don't like, but if she didn't like it, you can't get it. I would eventually get worn down with shopping, probably after 20 minutes, and just buy things to get done. My dad would sense this, and when I got home, he would ask me, "Why don't you come run an errand with me?" So he would take me straight to Macy's. In our world at that time, this was high-end shopping, and tell me, "Just get whatever you want, and I'll deal with Mom about it later." Not great parenting lessons, but much appreciated either way. I'm starting to realize in my house that I may be the Disney dad also with my kids, and I know where I need to put the blame for that now. One unrelated story I want to tell, as my kids encouraged me to tell today, and a lot of you know this, know him well. My dad was a hoarder of coins his whole life. He would fill up giant jugs with change and use it to pay for vacations. Later in life, he progressed his obsession to collecting $1 bills for my kids. Not just any $1 bill. He only wanted the ones where the serial numbers start with an H for Heather or an E for Aaron. He would train his friends to look for these bills and trade them with him. His goal was to have 1,800 $1 bills to present to each kid at their respective bat mitzvahs. It was very sweet and very generous. However, I said to him, because you got to understand what 1,800 $1 bills look like in a bag that he's transporting on the plane. And I said, they think I'm going to be a drug dealer or a stripper when I get to handling finances for a stripper when I get to the bank. But it didn't deter him in the least. He was also obsessed with $2 bills and would collect those and send them to my kids. Some men collect antique cars or fine bourbons. My dad was a $1 bill and $2 bill connoisseur. I think the best lesson my dad taught me was that we are judged by the friends we keep. My dad has chosen his friends wisely, and I truly love his crew of dedicated friends. His friends are all high-quality people that are with you when things are good, and they're with us when things are tough. He had many long-term friendships that he worked hard to invest in over the years. He had friends like Roy Satine and Mark Tendler that he knew from high school, Luke Hanner, who was his AE big brother from college. He had friends he met when he moved to Paramus nearly 50 years ago, like Shel Schmidt, Steve Masarski, Harvey Reese, Barry Abel, and Ken Glatzer, and many more. Steve, I know that you couldn't be here today and are listening on the live stream. And as you go through your health challenges, I think you and I were the two people he had to speak to every day. He loved you, and your friendship meant the world to him. My dad was always calling people, checking in on them, and listening to their problems, as if they were his own to solve. He had fun with his core friends, his poker buddies, especially ones that would lose often. He liked those the most. His Florida pickleball posse, and his synagogue family. I remember a lot of good times with his core friends and their families that really shaped my childhood. Emily and I, for years, have had no family in Atlanta. We are now grateful to have my brother-in-law, Daniel, and his family in Atlanta. However, we often spoke at holidays about how our friends become your family, and I think it was true for my dad. The common denominator is that he chose friends of high character that also valued family and community. He sought out friends that valued him as much as he valued them. He didn't have any fake friends or folks that he just put up with. The net effect of this is the wonderful group of family assembled here today and watching on live stream. I see the genuine hurt in their eyes. He's gone. And I watched over the past few days how lovingly and effortlessly all of them take on the role of looking out for my mom and I can't thank you enough. My dad commented throughout his life how much he liked my friends, and he acknowledged how carefully I chose my core friends and encouraged me to keep in touch with them. Unfortunately, I've lost touch with a lot of those friends, but losing him has reminded me to reconnect with my long-term friends and invest deeply into all of my friends. He showed me the importance of having close friends to count on throughout your life and even beyond. I want to wrap up this eulogy by focusing on how my dad made me feel like the most important person in his life. And it's same as what my daughter said. My dad really had no ego. He took great pride in others' accomplishments and was not shy in telling me, and apparently a lot of you, how proud he was of me and my family. He marveled at my accomplishments, big and small. He was in awe anytime I took him to see my office. He absolutely loved offices and noticed a few times how my office was much nicer than the desk that he had at PS 91 in the Bronx. He loved collecting my business cards over the years, and just this past week, I showed him my new website for my consulting business. I don't think he understood a lot of what was in it, but he was busting with pride. For years, I thought it was a little odd, kind of how impressed he was with how I handled myself professionally. My accomplishments to him were outsized, and he always made me feel like a big shot, especially in times of self-doubt. I now realize this was his way of showing love and ultimately building my self-confidence and self-worth. And there's times in our 20 years of marriage, Emily, where, I'll complain about something at work, or I'll tell her I just got this new contract, and she'll be, well, good. Why don't you call your dad? He'll really want to hear that. I was left with no doubt in my life how important I was to him. Anytime I called, he answered. No matter what he was doing, he answered the phone. I sometimes would call during his card games, which, could be pretty much any night of the week. And I felt bad interrupting this night where I knew he was having fun. And when I called and then figured out as I was talking to him that he was playing cards because he would never tell me, I would say, let's just talk later. Go have fun. But he never would. Last time I called him during his card game, he folded his hand immediately, told the guys they could keep whatever bet he had made in the pool and play without him. And he announced on the phone, he said, my son is calling. I'm out. He walked out to talk with me as if we had major business to discuss, other than did my daughter get her permit and how was her driving. It wasn't a particularly difficult sacrifice on his part, but the fact remains I noticed all the time how he prioritized me and made me feel important, and that shaped a lot of my self-worth and strengthened our relationship. I knew there was always one person, at least one person who cared about me, who would drop everything to help me and care about whatever was on my mind. To conclude, I want to try to read this part without crying, but that's clearly not going to work. I'll miss a lot of things about my dad, and here are a few. His daily phone calls, his hugs, his love of his family and friends, and his unconditional love for me, my wife, and his precious granddaughters. I love you, Dad.
As we'll now call upon Diane.
Finally there. Um, it was such a horrible shock hearing about Gary's sudden passing. No one was prepared for this news. My brother, as you all knew, was an exceptionally nice, friendly, Hamish man with a heart of gold. A real mensch, as the rabbi mentioned. He was always there for everyone to do a favor, give support, share a tear, and enjoy a good laugh. Both of my parents passed on the importance of having good friends and being connected and doing for family. It was part of Gary's DNA to behave the same way and value what our parents impressed on us. When my mother gave birth to me, Gary said, quote, "If only my mother would have waited another week, he was sure he would have had a brother. But a sister he got who loved him so much. I know he felt the same, even if I was a girl. As my older brother by 7 years, my parents instilled in him to look after me always. How lucky I was to feel the love and security knowing I was being protected by Gary. Of course, we had some words with each other from time to time. He often quoted the saying, until just recently, that we had as children, as we affectionately said, and hugged each other. We love each other, but we fight. When we went to sleepaway camp and I was separated from my parents and homesick, I had a brother making sure I was all right, and he reported this back to our parents. Gary was a little mischievous as a child, the fun one to tell stories about, as I was quieter and shy then, not now. Like the story told of Gary throwing out his toys from our apartment window. We don't know why. He just had fun doing it. He always loved a good time, was very popular with a great personality, and handsome. He joined a fraternity in college and loved the social life that he had, never mind his studies. That took second place. He was a great basketball player and an all-around sportsman. As a waiter in camp, he was so fast bringing out the food, they called him Turtle, an endearing and funny name for him, just the opposite of what he was. Ha ha. We often stayed up late at night watching Johnny Carson together, playing casino, and that tough game of knucks on the floor. Remember that game? It was always fun with Gary. Remembrances of our childhood stick in my mind. He didn't like Hebrew school so much, so he insisted to my parents that if he had to suffer, I had to also. And so off I went to the Hebrew Institute of University Heights like he did. Little did he know that Hebrew school would inspire me to become a more observant Jew and add such fulfillment to my life. Thank you, Gary. Years moved on, and I became a mother of triplets, Danny, Elon, and Brett. The joy of our lives. Gary was so happy and excited to be a triple-header uncle with our 3 sons. He was such an awesome uncle, visiting and babysitting often with Helen. He worked in the Bronx and after school came over regularly to help with the babies when we lived in Riverdale. He always brought something over to give them, never empty-handed. As they got older, our house was filled with sports paraphernalia from his Sportamask business. Sports pads, hats, keychains, etc. Whatever little tchotchkes he had in his business were given over to 3 guys. He and Warren came to Florida to run sports birthday parties for the kids. As a phys ed teacher, Gary could organize a great game of anything. He was a pro. Gary and Helen were great hosts. We had lots of good times at their house for Mother's Day, Father's Day, my parents' 50th anniversary party with lots of family. Gary made us all feel very welcome, throwing a ball on the lawn or shooting hoops or just shooting the breeze. After all, coming to the suburbs from New York City was like going to the country for us, and we always looked forward to going to Gary and Helen's house. We had lots of overnight stays there too, with our family, visiting from our many locations. Always a blast. Gary likewise came and visited us to Nashville, Washington, Rochester, St. Louis, Florida. Living far away never mattered in keeping us close. As we were leaving Riverdale to go to Nashville, I poignantly remember Gary crying in the elevator. It was very sad to say goodbye to each other and to the kids. On another note, when I had a liver biopsy in my 20s, my parents could not handle the stress and were very worried. They couldn't even come to the hospital. But Gary showed up to be there, and he sat beside me while the doctor put a needle into my liver. I screamed a lot. It was painful, but Gary gave me strength and support, and he was there. After hip surgery, Gary came to St. Louis and helped me through my recuperation. You could count on Gary, reliable and loyal, caring and feeling your pain, gentle in his ways with me and my family, always putting a smile on our faces. When I had another medical procedure, a heart ablation, after I was told I couldn't move and had to lay still, which felt like it was forever, I was on the phone with Gary, telling him that I felt so stiff that I thought I was going to start to cramp and ruin what the doctors tried to accomplish. Staying still, not moving, caused me so much anxiety. I talked it out with Gary and made it through. He was always there for me, my brother, my friend, my protector. God brought me a brother who instinctively knew how to be kind, to include me in everything. He wanted me part of his life, to know his friends, his work, Warren and his family. Everything he did, all that was important in his life, he wanted to share, and likewise was a great listener and wholeheartedly cared about my life. To share another memory of Gary's love of sports and a funny story about him, I think, as well. As a kid driving in the car with him, he was a little mischievous again, like he was when he was a little boy. We would listen to the ball game on the radio, which didn't interest me one bit. I wanted to hear music. Each time I asked Gary, when would it be over? When is it going to be over? He said, oh, it's the last inning. Well, the last inning was the entire game. My brother took care of our parents with tremendous devotion. He hated the traffic on the GW Bridge and Route 4 and the city, and then finding a parking spot was an ordeal. He knew the schedule of alternate side of the street parking and got there early to ensure a spot and sat in the car till the appropriate time. He helped them out with their medical problems, financial organization, and insurance issues, and just keeping them company. I would visit too and bought a mahjong set to try to stimulate my mother. My friend Amy came over. Where are you, Amy? My friend Amy came over, and we needed a fourth to play. Well, Gary was recruited. I knew he wasn't crazy about playing, but he did it anyway. Gary did not like turning me down and saying no. He loved people, could be the life of the party. At after-school social events from work, he organized skits and videoed events and loved talent show productions. He was a dynamic leader and had a dynamic personality. As JCCP president, he reached out to the community, stepped up when he was needed, helped to repair the world with many temple projects, particularly volunteering to help the homeless. He loved his Judaism, Jewish culture, and attending religious services, holidays, fun social events at the JCCP for fundraising, especially if it included card playing. Gary was the epitome of a people person. He loved introducing me to his friends at the pool in Del Rey, saying, "This is my sister Diane," to like a million people that were his friends. When I came to the JCCP years ago, it was the same. He was proud of me and proud to have so many wonderful friends that he introduced me to. In recent years, he became very sentimental about the past and the good old times. We spoke or texted practically every day, and we knew well what was happening in each other's lives, from the very mundane to more exciting happenings. He loved Helen, Warren, Emily, Heather, and Erin wholeheartedly, wanting to be so a part of their lives. Heather and Erin were his pride and joy, feeling a little sad as he realized they were no longer little, but happy they were growing up so nicely. Such beautiful granddaughters, ballerinas, smart and well poised. They are so mature, he said. Likewise, he loved my sons with all his heart and was proud of them with all of their accomplishments and just the kind of people he felt that they were good and doing the right things. To conclude, Gary lived a full, purposeful, vibrant life, a family man, an inspiring teacher, community leader, a Jewish loyalist, and always the dearest, most caring brother. I will keep him in my heart forever. There will never be another Gary.
As we'd now like to call upon Mr. Harvey Reese.
First of all, I'd just like to say to Warren, I can't actually say I remember you being on the bima, but this yarmulke is from your bar mitzvah. So where do I begin? We first met Helen and Gary 45 years ago through Linda and Steve Mussorgsky. Helen, Steve, and myself were in the same graduating class at Teaneck High School, but Helen and I never met. Linda introduced Helen and Sharon at a Hadassah meeting, and Gary and I hit it off when we both discovered we loved sports and we were terrible eaters, agreeing that we ate to live, not live to eat. Anyhow, we did many things together, both with and without the kids. There was an evening where the Hutmachers, Mussorgskys, and Reeses went to New York to see a show. This was right after a snowstorm, but we had tickets, so we went. The girls were wearing boots and carrying their good shoes from the garage to the theater, only to find that Sharon had dropped one of her shoes somewhere in the snow. I said I would go look for it by myself, but Gary and Steve insisted that they would go with me. Sure enough, we found it and made it back in time for the beginning of the show. However, that shoe was never the same. There was a time when the Hutmachers and us made plans to go to Dorney Park with Warren, Scott, and Kyle. However, it poured that day. Watching TV, we saw the weather was supposed to clear up in Pennsylvania, so we decided to take a chance and go. On the way, it rained so hard, I actually had to pull off to the side of the highway when we saw construction cones floating by us. We waited the rain out and actually had a good time at Dorney. The funniest moments occurred on another trip, calmly rafting down the Delaware River, again with the kids. During the trip, we would take a dip in the river, but a problem arose when Sharon could not get back into the raft. Gary said he would help her, but he would have to touch something. Later, just as we were nearing the end of the very pleasant and relaxing ride, Gary decided to smoke a cigarette. He lit one and then stretched his arms out. When you know it, his cigarette touched the raft and burned a hole in it. It began to deflate, so we all had to jump into the second raft that we were in. He never saw people end a trip as quickly as we did, packing up and getting back into our car and leaving before the damage to the raft was discovered. There were many trips together. The four of us especially enjoyed cruising. There were trips in the Caribbean, the Panama Canal, Alaska, Italy, Greece and Turkey, Hawaii, Spain and Morocco. And we always looked for the Jewish section no matter where we were. Of course, I cannot forget how wonderful our trip to Israel was through the JCCP with Rabbi Wiener. Words cannot express how great it was to be there. We saw each other just about every weekend, watching movies on Friday night, usually at their house, and guessing who would fall asleep first during the movie. Saturday night, we would do something else. We were invited every Rosh Hashanah to the Hutmachers, and they would come to us for Passover or Thanksgiving. For many years, we would bowl together in a mixed couples league, and whenever I needed a fourth for my bridge game, Gary would fill in. However, his love of cards was really devoted to poker. Whether in New Jersey or Florida, he was involved in one or two poker games. But I must admit, he hated the people in Florida for playing because they never bluffed. If they had a great hand, they stayed in. If they had a terrible hand, they left. He didn't like that. He wanted to keep on playing and raising the pot. When Helen and Gary moved to Florida a number of years ago, it changed some things, but never the love we have for them. Until recently, we were attempting to arrange a trip to Scotland and Ireland, but Gary's health prevented this. All the Reeses will certainly miss Gary's warm and loving personality.
And we'd like to invite forward one of Gary's beloved nephews, Mr. Elon Aiken.
It's going to be hard to imagine life without my Uncle Gary. We had so many incredible memories with him, and my brothers and I had such a special relationship with him. Our family came up to New York and New Jersey a few times a year, and from all those trips, I felt like I grew up in Uncle Gary and at Helen's house in Paramus. We loved going there, and we know how much he loved spending time with us. We went snow tubing, we played cards, hit golf balls at the driving range, played sports together, listened to Safam, hung out with Grandma and Grandpa, went to Shul together where it felt like he introduced us to the entire neighborhood, got chicken nuggets at Harold's and French fries at Noah's Ark. We went to the NBA draft together every year, and against our will, he made us go over to David Stern, introduce ourselves, and take a picture with him. He would always visit us at visiting day at summer camp, wherever we were. He and Warren came to all of our birthday parties growing up and ran them for us and our friends. He went to our college graduations, and whenever we were in town in Florida, always wanted us to come by the house, go swimming in his community's pool, play golf together, or play pickleball together. We did seders together and always had a blast singing Dayenu and Chad Gadya late into the night. He loved telling the story that when I was doing an internship at an accounting firm in New York City, a partner at the firm offered 4 tickets for me. So my brothers were also in the city. So the 3 of us went and we asked Uncle Gary if he wanted to come with us. And he got really excited. He thought the partner was giving us these tickets. These were going to be the best seats in the house. We were going to be sitting behind home plate. We were going to get all this amazing food. And we get to the stadium, and these were like the worst bleacher seats in Yankee Stadium. And he loved busting my chops about these seats. But whenever he told the story, he always ended it that he had a great time because he got to spend time with me and my brothers. And with Uncle Gary, that was what it all came down to. It didn't matter what we were doing. It just mattered that we were spending time together. And looking back on it, we understand how lucky we were to have an uncle, not a parent, but an uncle that loved us so much, that wanted to be in our lives, that showed up and was committed to showing up at any possible moment that he could. He also always made us feel like $1,000,000. He congratulated us about our successes that we had in our lives, and was so proud of our accomplishments, large and small. Whenever we hadn't seen him in a long time, he would always just make us feel so good. He would always greet me and he'd say, "Hey, E-Man, you look great." He was so easy to talk to. He was the friendliest person I know and had the ability to connect with anybody. He brought you into his life in such a natural way that you automatically felt close to him. My mom once mentioned to me that her best friends are people that are both great listeners and great sharers. It's not enough to be a good listener if you aren't comfortable sharing, and it's not enough to be a good sharer if you're not a great listener. And Uncle Gary was a great listener and a great sharer. He had an unbelievable way of balancing talking about himself, telling stories, and asking you about your life. He was a fantastic storyteller. He loved telling us about his huge winnings or losses at his poker games, which ended up just being like $5. He also loved to share details about trips that he had planned, what was going on in his friends' lives, and most importantly, what was going on with Warren, Emily, Heather, and Aaron. He also remembered everything going on in our lives and wanted to know the small details of what we were up to. He set such a good example of what it meant to be a good brother. He called my mom like every day, and they just talked and shared the intimate details of their lives. And it was just such a powerful example of what it means to be a part of someone's life. He was just there, asking my mom about her day and sharing what was going on with his. It also just always warmed my heart whenever my mom said that she was going over to Uncle Gary's pool to swim. It was just such a cool thing that they just wanted to hang out. No matter how far in life they went, he always viewed himself as my mom's big brother, and I think he always wanted to be there for her and be in her life in a significant way. I love you so much, Uncle Gary. You're the best uncle I could have ever asked for, and I feel so blessed to have had you in my life for all these years. Life will not be the same without you, but your energy, kindness, friendliness, and love of people will be celebrated and remembered by all of us.
My dear friends, I don't want to repeat all the beautiful sentiments that were shared about Gary, but Helen, I want to thank you for allowing me to share with you and your family and our guests today as well. Gary often spoke about his childhood in the Bronx. He had many friends from those days, some of whom he was in touch with throughout his entire life, some of whom who are here to mourn him today. Helen, I want to thank you for telling me about the 53 wonderful years that you and Gary enjoyed together. I didn't know until yesterday that you were set up on a blind date by Carol Tendler. Carol, good job. Good job. Helen, you always appreciated Gary's kind and gentle ways. And you share with me your respect, not only your love, your respect for him as your friend, as a father, as a grandfather, as a leader in his family. You recognized all of his wonderful qualities, and there were so many of them. Tell me about how you enjoyed going on cruises, your trip to Alaska, our synagogue trip to Israel years ago. Helen, all who are here today know what a shock and a profound loss that you and Warren and your family are experiencing at this difficult moment. I can only hope the memories of all the good that you and Gary shared will sustain you and in time provide you with comfort. Gary was a wonderful father to Warren, to his daughter-in-law Emily. He was loving and easygoing. Again, as Helen reminded me, Gary was a soft one. Helen, as you might imagine, was a disciplinarian. He did all the good stuff that fathers do. He went to all of Warren's games and activities. He was always there for you, Warren. He was so devoted to his beloved granddaughters, Heather and Erin, who eulogized him so beautifully this morning as well. He's mourned by his beloved sister Diane and Jeffrey, and by his nephews Brett, Daniel, Elon, and his wife Eva. He was such an important figure in your lives, and you all in his. Many knew of Gary's love for sports. He played basketball, he played pickleball, he played golf, though he admitted he wasn't very good. There are many here today who played basketball with Gary for years here at the synagogue, on Monday nights, on Sunday mornings. We're always going to remember his friendly manner, and his deadly bank shot, which he insisted that he would call or else it didn't count. Was there ever an event when somehow Gary didn't show up with those NBA shirts and those hats to distribute? Helen, I still have several in my closet with tags on them. He loved his life in New Jersey and later his new life in Florida. He found friends and community there. But Gary was the kind of person who made friends and created strong bonds wherever he went. This synagogue was Gary's second home. He was involved in so many things and in so many ways. He cared deeply for the religious life of this community. He attended all of our religious services regularly. He was committed to our daily minyan and would always be among the first that we would call to help if we needed an extra person. And even during the pandemic, even from Florida, he would log into the minyan on Zoom. Even from Florida, he always felt a deep connection to this place, to this community, and all of you. Gary was truly a beloved past president of our congregation. And he served this synagogue with distinction from 2004 to 2006 in that capacity. There are many here today who served with him on the board, on the executive board, and on committees. But those years as president were preceded by years as an officer, as a member of the executive board. Gary made a difference in both small and large ways every time he passed through these doors. I will always remember the many conversations, jokes, and interactions we shared together as we sat on the bima together during his presidency. Helen, it meant so much to me when you shared with me how much Gary enjoyed those times as well. And we have a rule. What happens on the bima stays on the bima. But I want to tell you something, Helen, and all of you here today. Gary was no ordinary congregant or no ordinary officer. He was all that, but he was also my friend. How lucky was I to have had that time with him. How lucky were all of you to have had that time with him as well. He was so well respected and beloved by pretty much everybody. He cared about people. And when Gary would wander around the synagogue, you could see how easily he could connect with people of all backgrounds, of all generations, of all experiences. I used to joke around, never give Gary Hutmacher the microphone. He has left this community a legacy of kindness and goodness that really made a difference. Whether it was on the basketball court, playing poker, in a board meeting, or just handing out candy and lollipops to the children in the synagogue on Shabbat morning. And there are many people here whose children lined up for Gary taking those candies out of his tallis bag every Shabbat and holiday. In any of those capacities and so many more that we don't have time to recall at this moment, he made a difference. When people like Gary leave us, they are not easily replaced. I want to say to you all that Gary would not only want, but expect that we carry on and move forward and continue to fulfill the mission of this synagogue, just as he did for so many years. So in his honor, let's all recommit to that, as he did for over 4 decades of devoted service to this synagogue and this community. Gary used to like the stories that I used to tell from the pulpit. So allow me just to conclude with one story from our rabbis of blessed memory. Story that some of you may know. Our rabbis told the story that one of the great scholars of the Second Temple period, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, once called together his 5 greatest students, each of whom would become a great rabbi in Israel. He told them to go out into the world, observe humanity, and then come back and tell me the finest quality that a person could achieve in life. And off they went. And they came back and he asked them what they had learned. What was that finest quality that a person could achieve in their lives? And one by one they gave their answers. One said, to be a good friend. Another said, to be a good neighbor. Another one said, to be et hanolad, a person who could really understand the impact of their actions on others. And one by one they came forward. To the last of them, Rabbi Eliezer came forward and said, the finest quality that a person could have is to possess a lev tov, a good heart. And Rabbi Yochanan said, that's what I'm looking for. Now, Gary, as you know, was a school teacher. By the way, one who had a profound impact on so many students, and so many of those students stayed in touch with Gary for years after he was formally done teaching them. But because Gary was a student, he would understand what happened next. Remember when you were in school, when you gave an answer, but the teacher liked somebody else's answer better? You might have said to the teacher, hey, what was wrong with mine? Which is what these did, these students who were destined to become great rabbis in Israel. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to them, there's nothing wrong with any of your answers. They're all wonderful. And would it be that any of us could master at least one of these qualities during the course of our lifetime? How wonderful that would be. But then he said to them, when a person possesses a lev tov, a good heart, it not only means a good heart as we might easily understand it, but a heart that has mastered all the other wonderful qualities that you have mentioned individually today. A lot's been said about the late Gary Hutmacher, blessed memory, today, and every bit of it is true. What brought all these things together, his role as a leader in his family, as a husband and a father and a father-in-law and a grandfather and a brother and a brother-in-law and dear uncle and a friend and leader and mentor to so many people here today, is that Gary had a good heart. And that heart lifted us all up as well. Yehi zichro baruch, may his memory always be a blessing and a source of great pride and hope and consolation to us in all the days that lie ahead. I know this family and this community will always remember him lovingly and fondly. And let us say together, Amen. Would you all please rise at this time? We'll now call upon Cantor Samwise to lead us in the El Malei Rachamim prayer.
El Malei Rachamim Shochel V'Amromim Am B'tzei Menucha Nechona כנפי השכינה. במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים. את נשמת גרשון בן הנח, שהלך לעולמו, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתירי ובשצי כנפיך לעולמים, ותצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו. ונאמר אמן.
Almighty God, who dwells on high and is full of compassion, grant perfect peace be the shelter of your loving presence among all who are holy and pure, who shine like the brightness of the heavens. To Gershon ben Henoch, the late Gary Hutmacher, of sacred memory, who has now been called to his eternal home. Almighty God, we ask that you remember all the worthy, all the righteous, all the kind, all the loving, and the gracious deeds that he performed while yet with us here in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life and rest in peace, the peace that he has truly earned. And let us say together, Amen. Friends, on behalf of the family now, we'd like to make several announcements. The burial service will take place immediately at the Cedar Park Bethel Cemetery. For those who will be attending the burial service at the cemetery, please follow the instructions of the funeral directors and the Paramus Police so that we may form an orderly procession to the cemetery. Following the burial service, the family will be observing Shiva and receiving visitors at the home of Sharon and Harvey Reese at 538 Clinton Road in Paramus, New Jersey. Again, that's 538 Clinton Road, Paramus, New Jersey. Today after the burial service and tomorrow. And there'll be a Shiva minyan at the Reese home at 8 p.m. this evening. We invite all to honor the family and Gary's memory by participating in the Shiva minyan this evening and on Wednesday night. Again, that's at 8 p.m. As of Tuesday, the Shiva will move to Florida to. Sorry? Excuse me, I'm sorry. Tuesday and Wednesday here in Paramus. I'm sorry for saying that incorrectly. As of Thursday, the Shiva will switch to Florida, to Helen Hutmacher's home. Please see the email that we sent out from the synagogue for more information and the times of the Shiva observance at the Hutmacher home in Florida. In lieu of flowers and gifts, the family asks that those who might wish to make a memorial contribution to honor the life and legacy of the late Gary Hutmacher, please consider a donation to Birthright Israel or HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Friends, we want to take this opportunity to extend our profound condolences to Helen, to Warren and Emily, and to beloved granddaughters Heather and Erin, to Gary's sister and brother-in-law Diane and Jeffrey, and to beloved nephews Brett, Daniel, Ilan, and his wife Eva, to all the other members of the extended family, neighbors, friends, and community, those who are here with us in the sanctuary and those who are joining us via live stream, and all who are mourning Gary's passing today. To you all, we extend to you the words of comfort of our Jewish tradition. Hamakom yinachem etchem, b'toch sha'ar v'lei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May you all be comforted and sustained among the mourners for Zion and Jerusalem. And let us say together, Amen. Friends, we're now going to call upon beloved granddaughters Heather and Erin, and beloved nephews Brett, Daniel, and Ilan, as well as Gary's brother-in-law Jeffrey, to serve as pallbearers. Please remain standing as the casket is removed from the sanctuary at this time.